Hello, my wonderful players! Well, I hope that you've watched yesterday's video, which was the How to Be a Great GM review of questions from the month of August, because there was some insight there that I think is valuable to the topics that were covered in August for players. Now, we are, of course, doing a review of your questions, statements, and comments based on the last month's videos that have been uploaded. So let's kick off with 5 ways to play rank. Now, in this video, I asked what sort of topics you'd like me to cover in the future, and I have made note of almost all of them. There are some fantastic suggestions in there, and I will be getting to them as time permits. There are very few that actually deal with how to play rank in games, which I assume is because either it doesn't crop up very often, it is difficult to run a hierarchical game, or that the video was sufficient. There was a question, however, from someone whose name popped up. It looks like dwarvish characters to me. It's not Russian. I don't know where it comes from. It could be Greek, perhaps. But anyway, the question was, what is the name of the song playing at the end credits? That song, I believe, was written by a very good friend of mine who's also a role player and a storyteller and a fantastic music composer by the name of Colin Meyer. I have for many years encouraged him to put his music onto the internet, as that man allow him to work more and get more exposure, but of course he is far more interested in other things than that kind of thing. So Colin Meyer, we do thank you very much for your wonderful music that plays us out. Moving on, 5 ideas on how alignment can benefit your character, work for your character, and that kind of thing. This sparked a lot of conversation around the whole idea of alignment to begin with, hence me suggesting you go and watch the GM videos as I cover a little bit in detail on what we sort of decided upon in terms of alignment there. But the Pretender wrote, "There are 2 ways that I use alignment. 1, gods are dicks and alignments are contrived, and 2, Lavina's responsibility." Now, he goes into quite great detail, or she, the Pretender, I'm not entirely sure, it could be either or both, with a name like that. But the whole idea behind Lavina's responsibility, as this person pointed out very eloquently in their response, is the idea of doing the right thing for self and selflessness and that sort of thing. I'm completely butchering it now, but go and read the comment if you are interested on the idea of Lavina's responsibility. One takes responsibility for one's actions, regardless of whether they are good or evil. One owns those and all of the sins that go along with it, basically. All of the negatives or the positives that go along with being either responsibly bad or responsibly evil. I take responsibility for my actions. So yes, the Pretender, I think that's a great idea of interpreting things. It would be interesting to see how that would express as a mechanic, because of course ultimately there are always mechanics involved in these kind of systems. Trock Bronze wrote, "I find alignments completely pointless. I like motivations and passions and such, where you define what's important, what you believe, and what you want to achieve." And I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. The alignment system is a difficult thing to align your characters and your players upon, as well as to figure out just how it all works and what kind of repercussions there are. Motivations, passions, and of course a goal for the character is a far better guide in terms of how your character should handle situations, in my opinion, and apparently in Trock Bronze's opinion as well. So again, those comments, people are making some fantastic suggestions and discussing and debating and unpacking things, and it's really, really good. Emperor Xander then responds, "I disagree the way you are portraying alignment. You think of this too realistically. Yes, everyone is the hero in their own story, and there are shades of grey, but when you have demons and devils, they are pure evil." Now, this is a valid argument that people have made insofar as in a fantasy setting, there are creatures of pure evil. And there are creatures of pure good, as well as everything in between. And so that then allows us to form a foundation, a reference point, if you will, of just what is good and what is evil. You're going to find a little later on this is contradicted by somebody else who points out that lawful is subjective and da-da-da-da-da-da. So yes, in a space where you have creatures that are the embodiment of evil or the embodiment of good, it then does give you a very strong argument and a very strong reference point to have these attached to the characters as well. So I can't argue with you, dear Emperor Xander. You are right on that point. I think the question here then is, how do you apply it to the characters to make sure that they're aware that if they do bad things, they're basically demonic, and if they do good things, they're basically angelic? How do you provide some kind of guidance for them as to what those extremes are? Just what is demonic and just what is angelic, and such like and so on. Moving on, lawful versus chaotic versus neutral. Jojo Celty said, I always interpret lawful as trust in some kind of authority, while I usually see chaotic as distrust in authority. By that statement, which I agree with, most of us on planet Earth are chaotic. Do we really trust the lawful authorities, or are we suspicious that they're trying to control us but don't tell anyone? So the idea of lawful being trust in a judiciary system or trust in a powerful lawmaker is one way of looking at it. Chaos is that you don't necessarily trust anyone. I'm not sure, though, that that's necessarily going to help you in terms of your character's decision-making. The chaotic character who distrusts authority, it sounds to me like that becomes a wanton license for simply acting against the law. Maybe that's what chaotic really means, is just this distrust and hatred of lawmakers, and so there's this dedication to not necessarily following the law, to pressing it and pushing it and seeing how far it can go. Black Valley Requiem says, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I had a thought. I don't think I would find your videos quite so convincing without the accent. BBC wildlife documentaries have conditioned me to believe whatever this accent says. Well, there are a lot of BBC presenters currently who are turning in their graves going, well, he's certainly not, definitely not one of us. He's currently in summer and will have to struggle tomorrow for finding food, because clearly he needs lots of it. The idea of an accent being convincing, this is something that you can use in your game. And I really like this, not because of the accent comment. I rally against sounding like a BBC commentator from the 1940s, but it is what it is. However, you can use this kind of stereotyping in your game. Put on one of these accents and either you become a supervillain, in which case you have to speak with a very clipped English accent and calmly and sedately and that kind of thing, or if you speak with a more authoritative / pompous way, you can maybe come across as more trustworthy. The idea of the accent, though, being able to control the interpretation of the characters, is a really powerful thought, and one that I think we should really focus on in terms of, even if you can't do an accent, in terms of saying, well, this person speaks with a very educated tone, they understand their topic quite well, or at least they certainly give the appearance of understanding their topic with a confidence that leaves you almost unquestioning. So if you can't do the accent, you can describe how the accent works or how it feels or how it sounds or where it comes from to perhaps instill in your characters a sense of trust or distrust, of hatred, of love, of loathing, etc., etc., etc. Anlumo, my apologies, Anlumo writes, is a Ferengi strictly following the rules of acquisition lawful? He has a precise codex to follow, which makes him predictable, but it's telling him to betray everyone at the earliest convenience. I would have to point out that that is an incorrect interpretation of the rules of acquisition. That betray everyone at the earliest convenience is completely incorrect. What it actually means is that you should use everyone at the earliest possible moment when you stand to gain the most latinum. If you use it before then, you're wasting profit opportunity. And that is not something that the rules of acquisition have ever said we should do, except that one time when Grand Negasek had that little problem, but that was because of a female. This is a can of worms. If the race decides that the actions, as based in this case on the rules of acquisition, which determine how the Ferengi, which is a race in Star Trek who are financially profit-based, operate, if that is how their culture says they operate, is that truly lawful? Is it truly evil? Is it truly good? Is it truly chaotic? Well, this brings the whole question of where do those morals come from? From the Federation perspective, it is of course ultimately evil to manipulate, use and deny your employees any opportunity for profit and to exploit them to the fullest extent. And Deep Space Nine, the TV series, explores a lot of these topics many times. What is interesting, however, is that because the Federation is portrayed as having faith in their legal and their way of operating, they tolerate this kind of behavior because it is culturally appropriate for the Ferengi to do that, and it is culturally appropriate for the Federation not to enforce their alignment, their choice of operating on these individuals. It raises some interesting questions if that's something that you want to look into. Of course, if you were to look at it from a universal perspective, all of life is about making sure that it survives. However it does that, so whether it is infecting other creatures to cause them to grow multiple appendages so that they can't escape from prey, so that the prey eats those multi-appendage creatures so that you as a virus perpetuate into more creatures, which is an absolutely diabolical way of reproducing, in my opinion. Would it be an evil act? It's a natural act. So whether that is evil or not is a good question. And this brings us to the final video that we're looking at, is good versus evil. Now again, lots of comments, lots of discussions, lots of debates on these kind of topics. So 62make4, I'm assuming a droid, is asking, maybe if I show my future GM this video, I might be allowed to play a paladin. Not even joking, every GM I've met has not allowed me to play one due to the stigma lawful good has. Well, again, this is one of the reasons why the alignment system is problematic if it is treated in an unknown way. And since apparently none of us seem to know exactly how it should or shouldn't work, or we are absolutely definite in how it should or shouldn't work, this is a conversation that must be had with the GM or the DM in particular about this whole idea of lawful good and how it works and how it needs to be played out. Of course, in later iterations of Dungeons and Dragons, where paladins were forced to be lawful good, later iterations have now dropped those requirements, as I think they have started to come under the pressure of this entire alignment debate. BLK Gardner says, I think the main problem with alignments is that RPGs themselves really don't even know what alignments are. Well, they try and describe them in the book, but there are certain vagaries, there are certain grey areas, and in certain cases there are some very hard points that are set out. But since as humans we have been grappling with the concept of good and evil since the very beginning of time and have written thousands of books on the subject, I happen to agree with this statement. There is no ways that an RPG that can try and embody these such massive ideas, which are all constructs of our own minds anyway, can accurately portray them. So again, it's about how do you portray them and how does your GM portray them in particular. VashGR21 says, sorry, it's just VashGR. The 21 was a number of hours ago that they wrote this comment. So VashGR says, I will never understand people who think being neutral means one day doing one thing and the next day doing another. What are you, schizophrenic? Do you have dissociative identity disorder? No. Neutral characters still have a steady morality. I like the explanation that you gave of making decisions in the moment and doing what needs to be done. Well, again, although I'm appreciative that you agree with my topic, and I suppose that's one of the reasons why you watch these videos in the first place, the idea that has come through in both of these reviews of your comments and questions is that the alignment system is tricky business, and I will repeat it again. This is a conversation for you to have with your GM at the table beforehand so that everyone is on the same page and there's no hurt feelings as we devolve into arguments over what is good and what is evil, what is lawful and what is not. I myself had a player the other day who was questioning the very nature of lawful and good because they felt their character was acting in the best interests of humanity, which must be a good act, surely. Well, again, it depends entirely on your perspective, because there have been many, many great leaders who have felt that they needed to protect their people by taking over planet Earth, and have generally never been labelled as good people. Anyway, until next time, This alignment thing is a ponderous thing, but fear not, next month we move on with more topics on questions that you have asked on these videos and more. So stay with us. Until then, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and until we see each other again, well, next week, I wish you and yours the happiest of playing.